Riders of Justice, new Danish film starring Mads Mikkelsen, is out in theaters. It's a mix of drama, dark comedy, really dark comedy, typical for a Scandinavian film, and some action thrown in as well. The story starts off with introducing the two main characters. Mikkelsen plays Markus, a hardened soldier out on assignment in the Middle East, and Nikolai Lee Kass is Otto, a statistician that's just been fired from his insurance company. As Otto is riding a train home that afternoon, he gives up his seat to Markus's wife. Seconds after, there is a train crash, there's a wreck, and multiple people end up dying, including the wife. Otto has survivor's guilt, but he also begins to suspect that the crash was not actually an accident, and instead a planned attack designed to take out a member of a bike gang called Riders of Justice, who turned snitch, and he was riding that train with an ongoing trial where his testimony would send multiple criminals to prison. Otto and two of his other nerd friends approach Markus when he gets back to Denmark, and they show him the illegally hacked and obtained research that they've made, which convinces him to go along with this revenge rampage, locating and killing the remaining members of the gang. So for a good chunk, the film feels like two different halves stitched together. One is Markus and his struggle to accept the death of his wife and not allowing himself and his teenage daughter to properly mourn and process that tragedy. It's sort of personal, harrowing drama about the tragedy and how some people don't know how to deal with it and refuse help from others. The second half of the film, the second part, is a super dark comedy where Markus is the straight man to the hijinks created by the other three men. At one point, the daughter discovers them around the house, and in order to keep the secret of why they're actually meeting, they pretend to be psychologists who came around to help Markus and Mathilde. And they also constantly bicker and argue with one another, which leads to numerous funny scenes, especially with Markus being constantly very much not amused by all that's going on, clearly thinking these guys are all idiots. But the more it goes, because it goes on like this for a while, where you have one scene drama, one scene comedy, one scene and so on. But the more it goes on, the more it turns out each of those guys actually also has some sort of baggage which makes them who they are. And then suddenly the movie clicks at some point and makes you understand that really, despite the somewhat comedic nature and the violent plot about murdering gang members, it is about processing grief in healthy and unhealthy ways. Unhealthy, obviously, being the murderous rampage, but along the way, sort of unexpectedly, the characters do begin to also process things in healthier ways by being together, by spending time cooking, eating food, playing chess, and just being friendly to one another. The dynamic between all those characters, which eventually include also Mathilde's boyfriend, as well as one additional person who I won't spoil, the dynamic between all of them slowly and quietly creeps into the film and creates this warm, slightly odd but certainly pleasant atmosphere. And the whole point is basically that it may be difficult to notice something that's there all along and appreciate it when you fixate on incorrect ways to deal with your grief. I think once you understand that, Riders of Justice really comes together and shows its cleverness at storytelling, because it's really cool in the way it uses jokes, action, violence in a story where you wouldn't expect these things, and in doing so it feels much more real. All in all, I think it ends up being a way better film than I expected because of how surprisingly intelligent and unusual it ends up being. Solid stuff.